Okay, we're live. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. Very good morning, early morning. Actually, John just sent the kids off. We just heard him close the door for this week's webinar on flow. We're actually looking at some advanced topics. And you know, John, what I just did is what I told you not to do. I actually had one of those YouTube windows open and the mic or the little speaker icon was enabled. So it's just echoed it right back into my ears. So that's suboptimal, but that's okay. So it was great catching up with you and John Levesque at the Power BI or the MVP Summit. Did we all have a great time?
Yeah.
Awesome job.
It was a really good time.
Great.
Yeah, the feedback sessions, the office hours were the best part. So I think me as the agenda owner, I probably need to actually go out and have less of us presenting to you and more of us having conversations with you, I think is what we take away. Now, this week's topic is actually how to look at structured JSON and walk through it with flows. Is that right, John?
Yes. So this is quite a bit building on last time I did one on manipulating binary. And that's really a lot of ideas around, hey, if flow can work with binary data, how do you push that from one, connected to another? This time with JSON is really looking at just structured data. And really, we will be getting JSONs from all our data sources, but you need to be able to transform them and pick out the parts that you want, build a new JSON to send it onto that next connector. So knowing how to play with JSON in Flow is useful.
So why don't we go ahead and get your screen shared? I think.
Yep.
Okay. And let me set the mic to it. You look like you've already done that. Perfect. And tell everybody about yourself. And I'm going to actually put me and John Levesque on mute, but we're actually going to be monitoring the Q&A window. And I see I've got Daniel Lakowitz over there. I've got Dan Castillo, Amaretto. I think I see Sandy in there. So there's a bunch of the old regulars over there to help out as well.
Cool. Excellent. So my name is John Liu. I'm a Microsoft Office 365 MVP from Australia, from Sydney, Australia. I think you guys are having a cold wave. We're actually having a heat wave when it's supposed to be autumn. It's pretty hot here. And it's very early. I'm coming from the future again. This is Wednesday morning. So do I just get right into my demos? I don't really have slide decks this time. I just want to go into the demos, and if we finish early, which is unlikely, we could just answer questions or cut this webinar shorter.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay, so firstly, I had one demo fail last time, and it bothered me a lot. And that was we took a Power Apps picture and we want to send that over to Flow. I just want to quickly show that this actually works, and it was actually.
Hey John, real quick, would you zoom in your screen just a couple clicks?
Oh yeah, Control plus for us. Exactly. Thanks, John.
Let me do 150.
Yeah, that looks great. Yeah, that looks great. Yep.
It hasn't changed on the YouTube.
Okay. Well, YouTube's about 5 seconds delayed. Yeah.
Sorry, I should not look at it. Oh yeah.
No, don't look at the YouTube. Yeah, you're great.
All right. Okay, so firstly, I want to show the failed demo from a month ago, 2 months ago now, and that one was regarding sending a picture from Power Apps over to Flow. So I just want to quickly show that does work. So this is the flow that we built last time. We created a create file action. We asked for the file name and also the file content from this connector, but the content that comes through has to be converted to data URI first. And between last time and this time, we've now had this update where you can see the tooltip. See, look at that.
Very nice.
Yeah, so the tooltip kind of mirrors what I have. I've developed a habit where I've always put the expression into the comments, just so that when I'm browsing quickly, I could see it. But the tooltip kind of, it's nice to see, yep, it's exactly what I expect to be there. So that's the actual flow. It's requesting both a file name, which is a string, as well as a binary from this Power Apps trigger. The file content needs to be converted to data URI format, and then it could be used here to create a file. Now, the file name, I think I might just leave that saved, so that's ready to go. And then we had this webinar sample. I tested this morning. I'm pretty sure it works this time. So last time what happens was, in my urge to demo, oh yeah, I'm back on the Microsoft Flow t-shirt. So technically this and the last webinar is kind of connected because I'm wearing the same t-shirt. So last time in my hurry to click this button, I didn't click on this camera control. And until you click on the camera control, it doesn't take a picture. So the camera 1 is actually null. So it keeps sending empty null to the service, which then says, no, there's no binary. So it just kind of dies. So that was what's actually wrong. And I keep clicking this button, thinking, what's wrong? What's wrong? So what I need to do is click on this camera first. I have a morning face. Look cool, John. And then I click this. And you see the little progress bar. This is more healthier. Because when it was null, that web service code was instant. So you see flow just ran through. And part of what we could see is you could see the binary. This is the JPEG data URL. This is JPEG base 64, which is converted to data URL and saved into SharePoint. So if I go over to SharePoint, look at my documents, and the picture should be here. And my shame, up there a few seconds ago. And my shame from a month ago. Oh, there we go. Look at me, my crazy face. So that was a demo that failed last time because I didn't click on the camera. Glad that's sorted. All right, next one. And in between the two sessions, I got this feedback that it would be nice to show what logic apps look like. And I thought I'll mention that very quickly. And I did a user group session yesterday in Sydney. And I also showed logic apps. So it helps frame some of the concepts around why we need to know expressions that says logic app expressions. And people are like, what's the relationship between logic apps and Microsoft Flow? So I thought I'd just quickly show that. Not everybody have an Azure account. But this is what Logic App looks like in the Azure portal. If you go into Microsoft Azure portal, look up your Logic Apps. This is one I created. If you go into the edit and look at the graphic designer, ta-da, it's Flow. I mean, let me make that bigger, I think. It looks pretty much exactly like Flow. This one's actually event grid trigger. I think I have other ones that are less scary. Yeah, so this one is a SharePoint trigger with a for each. So Logic Apps and Flow basically share the whole backend engine. They share the same JSON. So in Logic Apps, you can switch into JSON really easily. Whereas the designer is saying in Flow, you can't really see the JSON field. The way I tell people to consider is the Logic App is great if you're building applications across multiple tenants, because maybe people are paying you for subscription to your service. You just run your own Logic Apps account. You build on consumption only when your Logic App runs. But if you're building solutions for one specific tenant, then it's better to use Microsoft Flow because you have the licenses already as part of that tenant. So that's where I draw the line between where you do Logic Apps, and it's more designed for developer, whereas Flow covers from the end user up to the developer as well. So I wanted to quickly mention that. That was a question that came up that I thought I could show very quickly what that looked like. Now let's get that. That's the two things I wanted to do. Now back to this week. What I really want to do is this week's examples are really just around some the concepts around how to play with JSON inside Flow. There's some tools, there's some tricks or tips around what to look for. And it kind of builds up. So I've labeled them so I could find them a bit quicker. And the idea is that, we'll build on from one example to the next one. And hopefully there's a story. We'll get to the end and get, look at some really crazy stuff. So let's start here. So this one is, I call this colorful. This is my first tip. It's called colorful. And let me just show you what it does. So I have two variables. On the left, I have an object, and I'm initializing it with this JSON string. It's an object with just a name, John. On the right, I have a string with also the name John. Okay, so it's an object on the left and then a string on the right. Then I'm using a compose to basically just say, well, let's just, just show me what you have in that variable, right? 1 and 2. Just says variables object 1 and variables object 2. And then in the third one, I'm trying to get the name property from that object. Okay, so I'm using the variables object question mark. So this is a accessor to the property name, and then I'm doing it here as well. Okay, and let's run this. So the example, obviously, it's kind of expected that this one will fail. And this one will say that, hey, name is not a property on the string. But there are a few other things I want to see. So this one will be the name retrieved is John. So that's kind of expected. The thing I wanted to show is this. I'm glad I'm zoomed in. This JSON is in color. This JSON is black and white. Okay, so here's the first tip. If you think you're working with JSON, but it's black and white, you're not looking at JSON. You're looking at a string. Okay, and I might show you again. In the compose, it's the same. This is colorful. This is black and white. Okay, now I don't know whether, I guess this is a good tip, but I'm not sure what happens if you can't see color. So if you have a black and white monitor, or, I don't know, that will be a problem for the accessibility guys over at Microsoft Flow. But I do find this to be a very useful kind of debugging tip. And another place that I saw this happen was we were calling custom web services that were returning a JSON thing. And we thought Flow was picking it up as a JSON object, and then we wanted to start navigating into the properties and find its values, but we keep seeing errors. And it turns out that the response from this web service is being treated as a string, right? So it's this black and white thing. So in Flow, what you can do is, let me scroll to the right a little bit. So if you know it is a string, part of the reason why I put the variables here is because sometimes clicking on this thing doesn't work. But you can, so if you knew that is a string, you can force it back into a JSON object. So you see that's now picked up as JSON. Okay, so Flow has the ability to convert string back into JSON, but you kind of have to know, hey, that's already a JSON or that's already an object. And that's actually a string that's looking like JSON, but it's not actually JSON. That's the first tip. It's called the color tip. Now, next one. Next one, I see this being referenced quite a bit. And this one expands, let me just go through. So I'm creating the object again. This guy was John. So a lot of these examples are exercises around, progressively learning these operators or these operations that we will use on JSON objects. So again, I start with the object John. I'm assessing its name. And by default, you have this syntax. You could just do variable dot name. Okay. And then I try to do this one where I'm saying, okay, now let's get the title as well. But we'll notice that the title doesn't exist on my object. So this is actually going to fail. And then there's a different way to access the properties. You can use the kind of the array, the dictionary with a key and the property name being the key. But again, because title doesn't exist, this is also going to fail. And what do I have here? So let's quickly. And in Flow, when things fail, but you still wanted to continue, configure the run after. So just say, well, keep going. If that we're expecting that to fail, continue anyway. That is just the first object, I think. Sorry, that's not showing what I expected to be. Let me get rid of that.
You shouldn't have had ice cream for breakfast. You know that doesn't help your mental acuity, John.
No, you know, sometimes this thing doesn't display what I put in there. Like, I know that wasn't what I put in there.
All right.
Why I do this? Right, this is what I'm supposed to say. So basically, these three examples, I'm showing three different ways of accessing the property. You can do the dot title. This is the easiest way. Not a lot to say about that one. You can use the square one. This one's interesting because this is a variable. So you can pass in, you know, variables to build this thing. It's slightly better than that one. That one's hard-coded. This one is a variable. So you can kind of build this with another variable to retrieve that particular value. And then this is a addition where you say it's okay if this one doesn't exist, just returns null. Okay, so this will become null. And then the operation for coalesce is if this is null, then pick the next one. So it's kind of allow you to do a default value. And then this at the end just combines this one and the name, which is that one. This is the coalesce example with why we use the question mark. So these two fails, it says, hey, there is no title. That one fails and say, hey, there's no title. That one's successful, but it's null. See, you click this, it will be empty. Generally, if there's a value, you will see the string here. And then, so the coalesce is fall back to the default, which is Mr. And then the final result is Mr. John. Okay, so this is exercise around this question mark syntax. This guy. All right, now we go to the crazy stuff. This is like, you know, you kind of have to do the simple math exercises and then we do the hard stuff. The next fun one is this one. I see it happen all the time. I see people asking or requesting. The scenario is when a SharePoint trigger happens, and it fails a lot in this one. Sorry, when the SharePoint trigger happens, we only wanted to trigger when a certain field has changed. Like the request is, you know, SharePoint items are being changed all the time. We don't actually care about most of it. We only care about specific columns that have changed. Okay, that's the scenario. In SharePoint, I need a bit to set up. So I set up this list. This list is called list with history. In SharePoint, we can set up versioning on lists. So I basically turn that on. There's a versioning that happens with this list. I'll go back here. And if I look at the version history, you'll see that I've changed this icon. I've changed the completed to, wait, the first one I set these values, then I completed, then I changed the name to American spelling, and then I change it back, right? Surely I change it back. I haven't changed it back. Why should I change it back? So there are different versions. And then let's look at the flow. So that's the old one. Let me close that. I can close this. No more Power Apps today. No more Logic Apps today. And let's look at this. Now, Flow currently does not have actions that lets you read SharePoint history. The way to read the history is to use the SharePoint REST API. Now, to talk to the SharePoint REST API, I'll show this, but this is not part of what I'm showing. I'll show some very good articles. Let me see if I have one. This one. The one that I shared is the one done by Paul Comsey over in Perth, Australia. His article is not the first one that describes how to do this, but his article is the most detailed because he pretty much wrote 4 blog posts on how to do this. It's quite long, but he goes into a lot of details, a lot of the concepts. So I like to point people to here. But basically, you need to start on part 2, which he talks about how to get the auth, what endpoints to call, and then this is this step, getting the token, and then actually calling the SharePoint REST API. So quite a lot of details. I won't go through it. It's all these many steps. I'll probably share these links with Charles in the YouTube. I've encapsulated the whole step into this scope. Most of it is setting up variables and then calling to log in to receive an access token. Yeah, that's about it. So need that to get the auth. Once we have the auth token, we can call the SharePoint REST API like this. We just point it to my SharePoint site, get the list, get the item. The version is the ID from here. I want to get the version, and then I want the versions modified in the date modified order. So I want the latest version up the top coming down. We need the authorization token to talk to SharePoint Online. We got that token from this whole step that I've hidden away. Nothing here. And then let's quickly just show that first. We'll run this a few times. In fact, let me pick one of the ones that ran earlier. I'll just resubmit with that particular event. So this is the auth part. It's gone off and get the token. So that's taken a second. Then it's actually calling SharePoint. It is getting the history for this item, list number 2, this item 2. I'm getting back this JSON. Let me put this JSON back up. This is Visual Studio Code. I don't want to update. Right. So this is actually the JSON value from SharePoint. And we see this 1, 2, there's 2 versions of this. So this is version 2. The modified date and some of the values, the demo, the name, the title, completed. I think version 1. Yeah, hard to tell what I actually changed. But there are these 2 values. What do I want to show next? Right, the next one. So the next step is this one. Let me hide this again. When we receive data from SharePoint like this, or any web service, so this is the actual output from this action. You can use the Parse JSON action to basically help Flow generate these properties. And the way we do it is we use the generate schema, paste that whole thing. So this is what the real web service returns. hit the done, and Flow will actually generate this little schema thing. And once it's generated, you can use these properties in here. See, the Parse JSON gives you all these nice properties that you can use. So Parse JSON basically looks at this sample and then decides, oh, okay, the thing that you give me is actually an array, and the array has 2 objects in it, and these objects have these properties, these current, So it's created one for each one of these. Basically, they're all here. Now, if we look at what the actual value is, it actually is just this expression that says item, question mark, square, version label, title, demo, completed, and so on. So basically, what it is saying that for the current item in this loop, we want the title field, or we want the completed field and the demo field, that kind of thing. So this is why this is the third demo. It's kind of after the second one, because we kind of need to talk about what that question mark operator means and how do we retrieve these properties. Now, the select is a very important connector. What it does is it lets us simplify this complex JSON. So let's say this is what I get back from SharePoint. I create this thing where I say, well, I don't care about all that 20 or 30 properties. I only care about these 4. Right? So you can set up, you can add more new names, pick the one that you like. But basically you're saying, I don't care about that big array. I just care about the small one. So let me go back to where we ran earlier. I might leave this up. Yeah, I might leave this up so I can basically go back and forth. Let me edit that one. So in the one that we ran earlier, the Parse JSON converts it to basically it generates that schema for it. The select, basically we're passing that big JSON from the web service, but the output is more simplified. The output is just this. So if I go here, new page, you see the output is far simplified. So now really we're looking at this type of record and we're saying, oh, I can easily see what I changed from that to this. Right? So if you want to know when the SharePoint trigger is changed, you know, you got a SharePoint updated event, or it could be, it kind of had to be systems that tracks history, so you can see your previous version. But this basically lets you see, oh, okay, well, demo has changed, right? But it can also say, hey, the completed value has not changed, or the title has changed as well. So, yeah. So let's do that. Now, to go to the next step, I actually need something. I need something more than 2 rows. Let me go and just maybe just modify this. Changing something about color. And I've actually showed that demo, so let me save that. Come back here. I actually expect this to run, so let's try one more time. Come on, trigger. Well, let me see if there's an earlier one I wrote. So that's the first one. Let me just resubmit this one. Every time I lose patience and go and retrigger an old one, then it runs again in the new one. Anyway, so what I'm expecting to see is we are getting the history for that item number 1. Now, item number 1, I showed earlier in SharePoint, there's a lot of history. So if you look at this, there are multiple versions. The latest version is something like version 5. So there are several versions of this item that has been changed over time. And what we're doing with the take two, let me go to, maybe I'll use this as a way to see it. So we've done the select, which simplifies the object. We then do a take two. Take two basically says, for all these different versions, I only want the first two, right? And because I sort them from a reverse modified order, the top two are the latest. They are the latest current version and the one immediately preceding that. So the take two will shrink that array down. And then next, I build this thing. So this is really, I'm trying to flatten an array of two rows back into just one object. And the way I do it is I use this expression called last and first. So again, I'm referencing that property, version label, from this output. This is actually an array of two objects, one or two objects. Yeah, if it's only one version, it will be one object. And the last will take the last of this array, which is the second item. And then the first will take the first of the array, which was the first item. And if I go back here, look at, so that's take two, that shrinks it down to just the latest, version 5 and version 6. So that's one I just changed. This one flattens them together. So now we have one object with these two values in it, with the before and after, the value, demo, true or false. And then you could do things like condition that says, if the completed before is equal to the completed after, then the value that we want to change hasn't actually changed. So we're just going to terminate. Okay. So what do I want to add? So yeah, quite an involved step to get to where we want, but an extremely powerful step to say, hey, I only want my flow to continue if certain fields have changed, and these other fields I don't care about, then I actually want to just stop the flow. I don't want to execute. If the document has not been approved, I do not want to execute or continue further, and so on. You can kind of look back a few versions and see, what has been changed, and so on. I think Search Looker had a proof of concept or example with a state machine workflow. So he basically built a flow that is looping and it has state machines. This step could really help in the state machine where you could say, I only want to progress to the next stage if a certain field has been modified during this current step. So there are concepts around here that are very useful for where this could go. Now, a few more things I'm thinking. This whole step here, this whole involved step of getting SharePoint auth and calling the SharePoint REST API. These things you could do in Flow right now. They're quite involved. You kind of have to be a bit familiar with the REST API and how that all works. But I could easily see, nudge, John, that this could vastly simplify if we just get connected that says get history of this item, right? So if in SharePoint you had a get item history connector, you pass in the ID of this guy, and it will basically wrap around this whole thing. So this whole thing could, in 6 months, 3 months, become just one connector. And this whole flow becomes a lot more easier to understand. You basically have a connector that tells you the history of this item, and then you just need to, do a select, take the top two, convert it into a single object, and then you can do your condition. So, it's quite involved. I'm going through it in detail to try to explain what you need to do. But when you look at it at the very end, it's actually really few steps. There's a select, compose, and another compose. And then you can do the condition. Take one breath. Now, one demo I do want to show. This one. Let me See, the one that I was waiting for to run, it had run when I wasn't looking. This one I want to do is this. Let me just delete this.
Hey, John, when you were actually showing the runs of that, sorry guys,
Yeah.
Sandy asked this question a little while ago. When you were actually showing the runs, you had a bunch of failures, and Sandy was
Yes.
curious if that was due to intentional testing or was that actually doing? Yeah, there you go.
This one, yeah, I'm about to show why it failed.
Ah, perfect. Okay.
So if I refresh, why did that succeed? That shouldn't succeed. What?
Now you got demos that are working that
Oh,
shouldn't have worked.
no. You know why? See, because I've got this action right. The end that says ignore everything. So you see, this is failed, but then I ignored it. It's
Yeah,
like
yep, that makes sense.
a try catch. But I do want to show why this failed. That's why I blanked out that field. Okay, and the reason. Wait, let me go back. Let me just go back here. Let's look at this guy. Great question. You're way ahead of me. The step that failed is this one. It's the parse JSON thing. So remember I say we put the whole JSON of the web service into this parse JSON. It creates a schema for us, which gives us a good way of, building the select using the options. Now, there turns out there is a problem with this. The problem is that when the schema is inferred from the JSON that we put in, it is extremely strict. So what this is actually saying, if I can find it, what this is saying is that I expect there to be a title, and the title must be a string. But guess what? I just blanked it out. Oh, sorry, not title, demo. Demo must be a string. I blanked it out, so demo is currently null. And demo here, where is demo? Anyway, you can believe me. In there, it says demo must be a string. What this is doing is it's validating that JSON and says, nope, your JSON doesn't fit. See, I'm expecting a string, but I got null on the demo property. So I'm gonna just stop right now. And I find this, so I find the parse JSON to be a great tool, but I find this particular bit to be super painful. So I have a note in my notes for this whole exercise is we need to understand what parse JSON does, and then we need to understand how this works in order to not use parse JSON. So we don't actually need this. Where this is the result, we want the value. So if I delete this, you can see parse JSON tells us that there is a value property on the response, which is from this guy. Right? So if you click it and you hover over it, it says parse JSON. But the output of the parse JSON is really just this web service with the schema checked. So we could just get rid of this and say, well, I just want, let me just build that. So I basically say I want the output of this with the value, and I'm going, and I just lost it. Put that in there. So that's why I have this guy here. So once you do this, you don't really need this guy. You still think I'm using it. It's, maybe if I saved it, you would know. Your time has come. I am curious whether it will let me delete it now. Yeah, so it knows that I don't need it anymore. Okay, so basically I cut out that parse JSON step. I'm taking that output right into this. And in fact, Flow has already worked out that the item now refers to this array, which is coming from this action. So it's recolored them all green. Okay, rather than the purple, that was the parse JSON. So if I update that, go back here, take that flow, run that file. So this is the one with the null, right? Null in the demo. If I resubmit this. So I guess I wanted to show this because there are times where Parse JSON really gets in your way. So here you see the null. This is the null I'm looking for. Take the top two to see the null versus the string. And then we basically could do this compare. You could say the before for the demo value. And this step, yeah, so let me wrap that up. So that's what I meant in the notes where I say Parse JSON is very useful, understand it, but understand what it does with the property. And then you probably don't need it. Because ultimately what you want is you want to say, well, I only want that value. And I know that value is inside this value array. So I know this whole thing is the body. So it's really body dot value bracket title. That will give me that property that I want. And that will get us here. So then you don't need the parse JSON. And then because the parse JSON is so strict about the exact format of your JSON object that's coming back, if there are variations in the web service that you're calling, decides to return some nulls, it decides to not include a certain child node, then your parse JSON could fail. And it takes a lot of effort to go back and keep going back to that parse JSON schema and tweak it and make things optional. You just get to a point where you say, you know what, let me just take that out. I know what it does, and thank you very much, and I don't really need that step. So take that back out. So that's where I want to end up. That's the actual example. One more little note about this one. This step where I'm, it looks like I'm writing a lot of code. This is really necessary if you're only caring about this field. Like imagine in your flow, you don't really, you might have 30 fields or 20 fields, but for you to continue, you only care about 2 of them. So you don't really need to go and type before, after for every 20 field. Now you have 40 fields. That's just a lot of work that, doesn't really, you don't really need it. You only need the value that you actually care about. So if in my condition, I only want to check the particular values are title or maybe completed, then I don't actually need this bit. I don't need to check this. I like to include the version before and after. Is for your debugging, so you have some idea which versions you're looking at, but even that's not necessary. So this could be a lot simpler. Like this looks scary. This is probably the scariest one in this whole exercise. But this doesn't actually have to be this complicated. It could be just 2 fields or 4 fields. So I do want to mention that as well. So don't be too scared with this one. Was there any other thing? Is there any other questions? Or I might move on. This is probably the most complicated example. But really goes into how you flip the array, do a select on it to simplify it, do a take to take just the top 2 values, and then
Daniel asked a question a little while ago, and I'm not positive I actually am tracking the question. So I'm going to read it to you verbatim and see if you get it. It's also possible to do the select in the rest call, correct?
probably in the, probably in here.
Okay, there you go. You have,
yeah.
with tons of just exuding confidence, he says probably.
He's probably right. See, I'm also no, I'm pretty sure he's right. I'm pretty sure.
Is there a
Like
best practice as why you do it here versus down as a dedicated step, or what would you recommend and why?
I would do it here if you knew the column, and
okay,
you don't have to pull back all those values. We can just do it. Select title and demo and complete it. Yeah, let's just try it. Also with SharePoint, like if the column you're trying to get is hidden, or if it's a lookup column, you might want to expand it. There might be more reasons why you want to do it. Good feedback. That's great. feedback.
Oh, looks like it worked.
Yeah, this is flow. Everything works. Daniel, you're a genius. You just simplified this. But yeah, look, the JSON's a lot simpler. It doesn't have all this other stuff. It just has the 3 fields, which is actually quite good. Luckily, we took out that Parse JSON. Otherwise, it would complain pretty hard right now. You'll be like, hey, all these fields that I want has disappeared. Anyway, but you see the select has continued working and selected the columns that we care, which are these 4. I won't comment on the chat.
Okay.
Let me hide that. Yeah, no, that's a great improvement. Really like it. Okay. Oh no, okay. Here's some thoughts. In yeah, okay. In Flow, you can build nested flows. So imagine if you like this functionality quite a lot, you should wrap this whole entire thing, everything with the auth, all the way probably down to this last compose where you flatten it. You should wrap this into a nested flow so you could call it from any other flow, right? So when you're in some other flow and you get a SharePoint trigger, you're like, wow, I wonder what value actually changed in that particular call. You just forward the URL of the list and the list item ID to this nested flow, and the nested flow will go and fetch this history for you, do some of this parsing, and then return you back. Maybe not this, but maybe this. Maybe this. So your nested flow could come back and give you this. And that that will make a whole lot of this kind of become really accessible. You could just start with a SharePoint trigger, then you have a core HTTP trigger that calls the nested flow, and when that returns, it's already fetched the latest 2 versions of the history. So if you're doing it that way, maybe you would then just collect every field rather than be selective about what you call. But that's probably the one example where I think you can expand that and build this out. Quite a powerful technique, but right now you do need to auth, which is this long little bit. That needs to happen. The blog URL is post blog post. It's this one. Clever workarounds. He wrote 3 blog posts on this. I'm not gonna rewrite it. I'm just gonna point it at his lots of pictures. Let's go to the next demo. In my notes, the next demo is about compose. So this one is about the, there's a particular data operation called create CSV table. I don't know how many people have needed to create a CSV file. It's fun and not fun at the same time, but let's see. So I have a very simple array that I've created. It's just created initializing a variable. I have 2 rows, ABC columns, ABC columns. A little snag is I have a number and then I have a string. Okay, just to test the thing, make sure it's behaving correctly. Just throw a wrench in there. So that's really what that array looks like. I want to create a CSV table, so I'm putting that array in here. From the array, I want to generate the headers, and then I want the columns to be automatic. And let me just run that. I want to show that one first, and I want to show the next step. CSV table. So the incoming thing is an array. Note that it's colorful, so you know it's objects. And then the output is what you expect as a CSV file. There's 3 columns separated by comma with a line return at the end. and see this special treatment given to the quote, the comma inside the string. Anyway, that's there to screw it up. So you can't. That comma is strategically inserted to really test whether this thing falls over on simple cases. So basically that's that. Now, if you then come here and say, well, I don't want the column. So the scenario of not wanting the header column is basically if you're appending rows. So imagine you want to build out a CSV file of all the rows in your SQL database. But the database is quite big, so you don't want to say regenerate the whole thing all the time. You just want to basically watch for new rows. When new rows are triggered, I'm appending them to the current CSV file. So the CSV file will keep growing, but you don't have to go back and regenerate previous rows. So then you want to create it without the header, and then you can just kind of append the new chunk to the end of the previous one, and then keep going. So we'll click this, include headers, no. Run this. And no, that one. Now, John, this is a feedback for you. That option doesn't work, which is what I'm trying to show. So even though we say we don't want the header, that header is still here, which kind of says, oh, okay, what's going on? And then if you close it and reopen it, you will see that the option's gone back to yes. So actually, it's actually kind of ignoring that value. And the reason for this is the include headers is closely tied to the automatic columns. If you do not want the headers, you then need to also do your own custom columns. Okay, that's just how this control works. In fact, this is also how another control. We have this other create HTML table. It's very similar idea. From the array, I want to create HTML. So rather than concatenate as a CSV, I want to create a HTML table with lots of TRs and TDs, right? It's the same thing. If you use automatic, it will include headers. If you don't want headers, you have to turn off automatic, which gives you this fancy UI. This fancy UI is not. It's how can I explain it? It looks weird, but basically you use it very similar to the other one where I did the select. Let me just show why this is so related. So earlier we did this start operation select where we say from this array we want to create this map, right? Value A and then maybe A here or B or B. So you basically want to say item, no, A kind of, right? But inside the expression here, like this. So that's how you do this. So that's actually the same control here. This one looks uglier. We want custom columns, so we want to basically say I want A, B, and C. In fact, that's what I have here. So here I say I want no, I don't want that. Oh crap. Let me just clear it out for me. Let me just not save that. Yeah, so so very similar to the select operation, you're specifying the name of your property, the name of your the name of the property, and then the actual value that you want. And when we run this, sorry. I see a recent example by Ken Wearsey, where he's using the HTML table, where he's done similar to this. But this thing that looks funny, see the expression here? It says item. I'm glad there's this tooltip. It tells you at least what that is, because you can't actually click on it. And it brings up the expression dialog. But it's item question mark A. Like this. Okay, so that's what we paste into all this. In fact, haven't done this for a while. Let me double check this is working. So that's the create CSV table. And I've actually screwed it up. It's not done right. Sorry. Oh. No. There's some feedback around this, but this is actually the old expression. Like you'll see, it didn't bring up the expression panel. This is the old one. So you have to type expressions in the old way. This is like the, maybe this is a feedback to improve this action. But every time I do this, I have to do a few times to get the right expressions. It eludes me. Is that right? Yeah, now it's right. Yeah. So I have to start with that @ sign. So that basically get us back to here. And then what I have then in this, I'm including the header again. But basically what I then can do is use, say, SharePoint, fetch a file, fetch a current CSV file, take the content of it, append the new one to the end of it, and then write some more. Wow, there's all this rubbish in it. This is a nasty CSV file. Pretty sure Excel will die when it opens this. Anyway, write that whole mess into CSV. So some applications with this syntax, it's nicer in the select action, but you also see it in both the create table as create CSV as well as the create HTML. You see that expression. I'm hoping that UI gets updated to be more similar to the select, and that will make that easier to use. Okay. Let me. How are we doing for time? I have one demo to do, but
actually, we're not going to have a chance to do your last demo because if we go after the hour, I can't go out and edit it in YouTube in case we actually need to go out and doctor it up or anything like that.
All right, I will leave the last demo for next time.
So we're going to have to actually owe that to our audience. So why don't you go ahead and wrap up if any learnings that you want to actually share with these people, and we could go ahead and finish this off.
Okay, I might just close up with a small comment around the use of variables versus compose. In Flow, a compose is like a use once off variable. It's kind of like defining a file rather than defining a variable with a very specific type. And compose are really quick to use, and they happen very quickly. And if you are, but you need things like variables if you want to go back in a loop and update that value. So a lot of times you might use the two together. Use compose to build up what the new value should be, and then write that back into the variable. So in the grand scheme of manipulating lots of JSON, then we end up using a lot of compose. Only set variables sometimes, because generally you want to build up to what you want to be as the result JSON, and then just write that back. So I want to end that with just that tip, a discussion, light discussion around variables and compose actions. Okay.
Sounds really good. And what are you going to cover next time with that we see? It's not in the calendar, but and I'm booked out quite a ways. But I just want to know what we're looking at next time.
So the next one I wanted to show was actually we have a SharePoint list item or a SQL item that is a row, right? Imagine you have a row with many fields.
Right.
You want to pivot that to be vertical. So you want to basically convert a single row or many columns into multiple rows with each field, right?
Yep. You want to pivot and unpivot. As a Power BI guy, I get that real well.
Yeah. And then basically build a flow that could, let's hope that works. This is live demo with the PDF generation, which has been fixed. You know, I demoed it and then it broke for a month. Everybody was telling me it's broken. It is now fixed. I could show you it is fixed. But look at this. This is a SharePoint list item that's pivoted to be vertical.
Ah, perfect. Okay.
This uses that convert to HTML table. Extremely good if you want to generate summary emails and attach and send to people. But we'll show that next time. That's enough teaser.
Okay, sounds really good. And I'm off to Dublin next month, but there's a couple more webinars next week for us before I head off. Other than that, John, I really want to thank you. John, I want to thank you, Daniel, Sandy, Mr. Castillo, and Eric DeZeus, all the guys that joined us. I want to thank you all, and looking forward to actually seeing you maybe Thursday on my Power BI session, where we are going to cover, no idea. I'd have to go back and look at see what we're going to cover Thursday. Oh, it's Layla with R script. Is who actually what we've got. So I'll see you guys Thursday.
Cool. Thanks.
Okay.